and a very warm welcome to the first episode of a brand new series called Be the Change. My name is Lubna Nadvi, and I will be your host through this series. We hope to discuss a number of issues related to change in the country, and change across the globe. The concept of Be the Change is one that has been inspired by the thoughts and teachings of the great Mahatma Gandhi, who said very inspiringly, "Be the change that you want to see." This program hopes to actually take you, the viewer, through many of the issues that we experience in society and talk about how it is that we need to change those things around us. Now, what do we actually mean by change? Does it mean something physical, as in change the way that you dress, or change the way that you engage towards another person? Or does it mean something that perhaps is more emotional or psychological? Actually, change is something that encompasses all of these things. And what we want to actually do through this new program is actually to inspire you, the viewer, to talk about how to change things from a holistic perspective. Now, if we look at society today, what is it that we actually notice? We notice that change is actually the constant, that things will change over a period of time. So when we speak about change, what we are actually talking about is something that is inevitable. But sometimes there are issues that you will find that frustrate you, that you feel need to actually be different. And so how do we go about making sure that that happens? We actually need to take the initiative to make it happen. And so through the concept of Be the Change, we are saying that you at home and wherever you are out there, you can actually be the change in your own environment, in your own society. Now, this series is really going to be focusing on a number of very important themes. And what are some of these themes? We want to talk about the very real social justice issues that we encounter out there. We want to look at things like poverty. We want to look at things like unemployment, about gender-based violence. We want to look at the issues of terrorism. We want to look at the issues of social cohesion. How are people engaging each other? How are they actually getting along with each other? Are they even getting along with each other? We want to talk about the issues of crime, the issues of gangsterism, the issues of drug violence. These are things that really affect our societies out there. The other very important thing that we want to focus on in this series is the issue of how are we actually tolerating difference in our society. One of the challenges that we have actually seen over a period of time is the fact that we actually find it very difficult sometimes to actually get along with each other. We find it difficult to talk to each other about things without actually being able to accept that the other person may think very differently from how we think. So what we're going to do in the second half of this show is actually to talk about the issue of tolerance and cohesion, or social cohesion as we generally understand it. Tolerance is actually a very important part of actually being able to bring about change, because until we are able to actually tolerate a situation, to be able to tolerate perhaps the differences between us and other people, it is very difficult to actually bring about the change. We often say that we should be able to coexist with others, even if there are differences amongst us. We often say things like live and let live. And so what do these things actually mean? They mean that we actually have to learn to be able to allow other people to hold their differences of opinion without actually shouting them down or actually getting angry or upset. Of course, we can disagree, but we can disagree respectfully, and of course without getting violent. So what we would really like to focus on for this first episode is the issue of tolerance that actually allows us to move towards the change that is needed. Now, coming back to the issue of be the change. We had started talking about how do we bring about change? Is it something that requires us to be physically active? Is it something that requires us to think differently? Or is it something that requires us to combine both actions? In this episode, we will be exploring how to start thinking about change by starting to think about tolerance. And that is the first point at which we will begin the journey of Be the Change. I had mentioned that the words inspired by Mahatma Gandhi, which was "Be the change you want to see," is really about how we see the world. We see the world in certain ways. We want the world to be a certain way. We would like people to be happy. We ourselves would like to be happy. And we can only actually see that happening if we make an effort to actually go out there and do the things that are required. So in this concept of be the change, become the change. So to be the change requires us to actually start thinking differently. It requires us to start seeing the world from a different perspective. Very often we grow up being very much affected by what we see around us. We become adults that carry around a lot of ideas, and sometimes these ideas are very negative and they weigh us down. And what we actually need to do is to ensure that we make a conscious decision to actually change those views, to be able to actually move forward. Because if we carry those views with us, we are going to actually weigh ourselves down further. So being the change actually means changing ourselves, starting with ourselves. We cannot actually change the world out there if we ourselves are the source of the problem. If we do not actually become the agents of change by being able to go out there and resolve the problems, how do we expect others to change? So effectively, the words of Mahatma Gandhi, we really become the change, and it means starting off with yourself. So if you throw a stone or a pebble into a pond, what do you see? You see the ripples in the water. And what that actually means is that a single stone or a single pebble has the potential to be able to make such huge change. It creates waves. It creates a sort of effect that actually enables that water to move. And so I always make the point that one should be the pebble in the pond, because that actually is the point at which change starts to occur. So for us to be able to make the changes that we need to see out there, we need to effectively identify what some of the problems are. In the opening few minutes of the program, we had talked about some of the social justice issues that we actually are faced with out there. When you wake up in the morning, what is it that you see when you perhaps go to your window? Do you see children playing out in the streets? Or do you see perhaps violence that is going on outside, just outside your window? Do you see people behaving with kindness towards each other? Or do you see people shouting at each other? Do you see actually traffic moving along the road? Or do you see something else that is actually not supposed to be there? So when we look outside our window, we actually have to make sure that what we see out there is what we want to see. We don't want to see violence outside our homes. We want to see a situation of peace. We want to make sure that actually the scenes that we encounter just outside where we live are actually the scenes that should be there. So in terms of the change that we're talking about, it starts with ourselves. What is it that we see? What is it that we would like to see? And what is it that we can do to actually make that happen? As we proceed towards the sort of situation of change that we would like to see happen, we actually need to identify the steps that would be required to make that happen. So I had said that we will talk about tolerance in the second half of the program, and I want to actually use that as an example of how we can actually bring about change. If we are actually intolerant, if we are actually the kind of people that do not actually allow for differences of opinion, we're going to find ourselves in a very difficult situation, because if we are going to create obstacles for change, then how does change come about? You can actually only bring about that change that you want to see when the environment within which we exist enables that, when the environment that we live in actually facilitates that change. So you have to be able to be flexible, you have to be able to be tolerant, and you have to be able to actually allow for new things to happen and for that change to appear.